My name is Elara Wynn, 29 years old. The ballroom shimmered like a stage designed to remind me of everything I wasn't. Fairy lights draped across the vaulted ceiling, crystal chandeliers scattering brilliance into every corner, catching laughter like it was currency. Gold-edged tables stretched across the floor, each one layered with pale roses, silver cutlery, and menus that smelled faintly of ink and wealth. At the center of it all stood my sister Rachel in her rehearsal dress, a fitted ivory sheath that clung to her like a declaration that she already owned the world. She laughed, tilting her head so her diamond earrings caught the light, her smile rehearsed to perfection. I lingered at the back, trying to steady my breath. The scent of polished marble and champagne mixed with something sharper, memory, maybe, or regret. I shouldn't have come, I told myself, but invitations from family aren't really invitations. They're summons. Rachel's gaze found me almost instantly, Faye, like she'd been waiting, her lips curled, a cruel crescent moon. "Don't seat her near the front," she announced, her voice sharp enough to carry through the music and chatter. "She doesn't belong there." The words hit like ice water. A ripple of laughter broke out from the bridesmaids, high-pitched and synchronized, like they'd practiced cruelty together. A few of the groomsmen chuckled too, their eyes flicking over me as though I were an intruder who had wandered into a world that didn't fit my shoes or my dress. I felt my throat close. My hands, hidden behind the chair I clutched, trembled. Humiliation pressed down harder than the chandelier light above me. My pulse was loud, too loud. I swallowed hard, telling myself I'd survived worse, but in that moment, my body didn't believe me. One bridesmaid shifted, her voice tentative. "Come on, Ra, don't be harsh." Rachel flicked her wrist dismissively, her laughter chiming over theirs. "Please, she's used to it." Her eyes stayed locked on mine, daring me to react, to crumble, to give her the satisfaction. I dropped my gaze to the polished floor, hoping no one noticed the heat rising in my face. My reflection wavered faintly in the marble beneath me, blurred, like I didn't even exist fully in this room. Then, fingers touched my shoulder, strong, steady, deliberate. The air shifted instantly. Conversation stuttered. A hush spread through the ballroom as if someone had cut the music mid-song. My heart leapt, confused, terrified. Slowly, I turned my head. Standing beside me was Alexander Pierce. The Alexander Pierce. His tailored navy suit was cut to perfection, his presence commanding without effort, his expression unreadable, yet sharpened with intent. He was a man whispered about in business columns, rumored to have toppled empires with nothing but a pen and a single signature. No one expected him to walk into a rehearsal like this, and certainly no one expected him to stand beside me. His hand stayed firm on my shoulder, grounding, but not forceful. His voice dropped low, even, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Tell them who you really are now." A collective gasp moved through the guests. Bridesmaids froze mid-laugh, their smirks faltering. Even the groomsmen who had chuckled seconds earlier leaned forward, suddenly invested. My pulse slammed against my ribs. My throat tightened. The weight of every year spent shrinking, every cruel word endured, pressed against me. Rachel's smirk faltered for just a second, the confidence she had rehearsed for years, cracking like porcelain under too much heat. For the first time in what felt like forever, I lifted my chin. The silence in the ballroom stretched, taut as a rope about to snap. All eyes locked on me, waiting, daring me to speak. Rachel's laughter tried to return, brittle, forced. She tossed her curls back, her dress shimmering. "Oh, come on! Are we really doing this? She's just Elara, my sister who lurks in the background. Don't make her out to be someone important." "Lurks," the word stabbed sharper than glass. Some guests gave nervous chuckles, unsure if they should laugh or stay quiet. The sound wavered, hollow. A groomsman cleared his throat but didn't follow through with another joke. The tide was shifting, though no one wanted to admit it. Alexander's gaze swept the crowd, cool and precise. His voice cut clean through the tension. "Funny," he said evenly. "From where I stand, it looks like the only person in this room with dignity is her." A murmur rippled, shock spreading faster than champagne bubbles. My lips parted. I had no words, only disbelief. No one, absolutely no one, had ever stood up for me in front of Rachel. Rachel's fiancé, Mark, shifted in his seat, his brow furrowing. "Look, I don't know what this is about, but maybe we should—" "You don't need to sit down," Alexander interrupted, calm yet terrifying in its certainty. Mark froze, then sank back into his chair like a chastised child. I could feel dozens of eyes drilling into me, curious, judgmental, confused. A heat rose in my chest, not from shame this time, but from something unfamiliar. Something like possibility. Elara, Alexander said again, softer this time. For me alone. His tone was grounding, but firm. They don't get to define you. You tell them, or I will. My instinct screamed to stay silent, to fade into the shadows as always. But something in his eyes, sharp, unrelenting, and yet patient, ignited something dormant in me. A spark I hadn't allowed to burn in years. I drew a breath. It rattled, unsteady. But I stepped forward anyway. The sound of my heels echoed across the marble floor, louder than the whispers rippling through the room. Rachel's face twitched. She masked it quickly with another smirk, but her eyes betrayed her, narrowing, sharp, calculating. "You've all spent years treating me like I'm nothing," I began, my voice trembling, but finding weight with every word. My eyes swept over the bridesmaids, the cousins who whispered behind napkins, the groomsmen who chuckled as if cruelty were tradition. But maybe that's because none of you ever cared to see who I really am. Rachel scoffed, tossing her hair back with practiced arrogance. "And who exactly are you, Elara? You work in some dusty office. You wear dresses secondhand. You show up where you're barely wanted. Don't act like you're suddenly somebody." Gasps circled at her cruelty. A few guests shifted, discomfort flickering on their faces. For the first time, Rachel's poison wasn't landing the way she expected. Before I could answer, Alexander stepped closer, his presence shadowing mine like a storm gathering. His voice was steady, commanding. "She's not just somebody, Rachel. She's the reason half of you even have jobs." The air cracked open. The chandeliers above seemed to tremble with the weight of his words. Guests leaned forward, whispers breaking out, shock spreading like wildfire. Rachel blinked rapidly, her smirk faltering, her voice sharp and thin. "What are you talking about?" And for the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, but fire. I turned fully to face her. My voice no longer trembled. It cut, steady, deliberate. "I am not the failure you've painted me to be." The room inhaled collectively. Rachel's eyes narrowed, fury flickering. And just as the silence coiled tighter, I knew. I wasn't finished yet. I let the silence hold me for one heartbeat, then another, until my own fear grew bored and sat down. "You kept me in the background because it served you," I said, and my voice didn't crack this time. "Because if I stayed small, you stayed large. But that's a trick of lighting, Rachel, not the truth." I exhaled slowly, feeling the tremor leave my hands. "The truth is, I haven't been standing still. I've been building. Quietly." A rustle moved through the guests, the sound of lace and satin and whispered calculations. A bridesmaid bit the inside of her cheek. A cousin who never spoke to me at reunions leaned forward like he'd stumbled into a better story than he paid for. Even the hotel manager had gone still by the door, watching like the night had produced a show he didn't dare interrupt. Rachel's chin tipped, that old practiced tilt, the one that said she'd already decided what I was before I opened my mouth. "Building what, Elara? A tolerance for humiliation?" She smiled, bright and brittle. "It suits you." Alexander didn't move, but the air around him seemed to narrow. "She doesn't owe you this," he said, "just for me. But if you want to say it, say it." I turned so the room could see my face, and so I could see theirs. "While you were busy performing perfection," I said evenly, "I was learning to read what wasn't said out loud, balance sheets that lied in polite fonts, vendors who got paid on the 29th because there was nothing left on the 30th. You paraded a company at dinner parties, and I studied the footnotes you didn't know existed." A groomsman whispered, "What company?" Another shot him a look that said, "Keep up." "My company," Rachel snapped. "Harrison and Vale Events, in case you've been living under a rock. The firm that pulled half these people's weddings out of nightmares." Her smile cut at me, something you'd know if you tried aspiring for once. I didn't flinch. "The one that nearly defaulted 2 years ago," I said, calm as a blade. "The one that needed a bridge loan with a clause you didn't read, because the typeface was small and your nails were done." Mark's head jerked. "What clause?" Rachel answered too quickly. "He's lying." I met Mark's eyes, and for the briefest second, he looked like he wanted to believe me. Not for me, but for the unsettling idea that the person he was marrying might have blind spots big enough to swallow a future. I held his gaze until his jaw tightened and he looked away. I learned slowly, I continued, with tiny buys and one clean exit that taught me what patience costs. I put money where ridicule couldn't reach it. I formed shell companies so no one would see my name until it mattered. I bought when you were bragging and sold when you were loudest. And last month, my chest rose, steady. Last month, I became the majority shareholder of Harrison and Vale. The room sucked in air like a single lung. Somewhere, a fork clinked against a glass and then froze. A bridesmaid's hand flew to her mouth, an involuntary little gasp that she tried to hide behind a laugh that didn't survive its first second. You're lying, Rachel said. It wasn't a performance. It was naked panic dressed as certainty. You're not even... Her voice splintered, found itself, sharpened. You don't have that kind of money. You never asked how many extra shifts I worked, I said quietly. You saw the dress and decided on the bank account. That's always been your math. And who, she hissed, would sell you anything that matters? Alexander finally stepped out of the shadow of my shoulder, just enough that the chandeliers caught the line of his jaw. I would, he said. The chandeliers might as well have dropped from the ceiling for the effect it had. Conversations detonated in clusters around the room, careful people suddenly careless. Alexander, and me, was gossip with teeth. Rachel laughed, a too loud sound that bounced off the marble and came back flat. You expect anyone to believe that? You, what? Did a favor for the charity case. If he took offense, he didn't show it. Nothing I do is a favor, he said mildly. It's a valuation. Mark leaned forward, hands flat on his knees like a man at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide if the view was worth the danger. Is there proof? He asked, looking from Alexander to me, as though the truth might be visible on our skin. Documents? Anything? There are board filings, Alexander replied, still in that unnervingly calm voice. Tomorrow morning's announcement would have told you. But since we're all here, he glanced at the hotel manager, who flinched like the gaze carried legal weight. It is what it is. You set me up, Rachel whispered, eyes on me, but speaking to the room. You came into my night with your little savior and humiliated me. I came in with my name, I said. You handed me the humiliation at the door. She looked at Mark then, and there was a flicker of something painful in her expression. Not performance, not rage. A small, frightened child peeking through the woman who knew how to turn a room like a steering wheel. You knew about this? She asked him, softer than I'd heard all night. He shook his head once, a tiny movement that somehow traveled across the whole ballroom. No. And you, she said to Alexander, the softness replaced, rage sliding back into position. Why would a man like you sell anything to her? Alexander's eyes met mine for the space of a breath and returned to Rachel. Because she did the one thing you can't teach, he said. She watched. She listened. She waited. She made decisions that didn't need applause to exist. The words slid into me, like a key I hadn't realized I'd been carrying my whole life. It settled something that had been loose and rattling for years. I didn't smile. It would have been a victory lap, and I wasn't running anywhere yet. Across the room, an aunt measured me anew, the way people reassess art when they notice the signature. Two cousins made the mistake of looking pleased for me before catching Rachel's eyes and rearranging their faces into neutrality. A bridesmaid studied her shoes, and in the reflective leather found a version of herself she didn't want to be. Rachel's voice pitched upward. You think this makes you better than me? You bought paper. I built a brand. And left the doors unlocked, I said. Numbers tell the truth when they think no one's listening. You're not capable of this, she snapped, the insult sounding tired the moment it left her mouth, as if it had traveled too many miles over too many years. You're a shadow, Elara. You always have been. I stepped closer, not enough to be a threat, but enough to be inescapable. Then why do you look like you've seen a ghost? A ripple of laughter appeared and then strangled itself, like the room was learning in real time what lines not to cross anymore. Mark stood, then sat halfway back down, caught between impulse and etiquette. If this is true, he said carefully, then the company isn't just yours to parade. Decisions are still mine, Rachel cut in, desperate. Majority shareholder or not, she's never stepped foot in a board meeting. That'll change, Alexander said, almost idly. The calendar will adjust. Stay out of this, she said, but the words lacked heat. She looked at me again, and for a heartbeat, we were in our parents' hallway, both of us 5 years old, both of us wanting the same toy, both of us believing wanting should be enough. Why did you do this to me? She asked. Not to the room, not to the audience, to me. I answered her honestly. Because you never let me exist without asking me to disappear first. Something fragile flickered across her face and then vanished under an avalanche of pride. You planned this, she said, grasping for contempt and finding it. You and your rescuer came here to make a scene. I came to sit where I was told, I said. You made a scene when you announced I didn't belong. And you decided to crown yourself in front of my guests? Her voice went brittle again, the pitch of crystal seconds before it shatters. You're pathetic. Alexander's hand brushed the air, not touching me this time, but stopping words from colliding. Enough, he said softly. The word didn't need volume. It arrived with authority anyway. Around us, the music had long died. In its absence, the chandeliers hummed faintly, as if electricity itself were nervous. The manager shifted, then stood straighter when he noticed Alexander noticing him. A server froze mid-step, a silver tray trembling, bubbles in the flutes quivering like living things. Here is what will happen, Alexander said, his tone the gentlest cut I'd ever heard. People will go back to their seats. You will continue your rehearsal. Tomorrow morning, an industry bulletin and a legal notice will confirm what's been said. Tonight, you may decide to be gracious or memorable. Rachel's lips parted around a word that didn't arrive. She swallowed instead, the movement sharp in her throat. Grace had always been an easy costume for her. Grace without control was something else. Elara, Mark said, turning to me, careful, measured, as though I might break or explode. If you own the majority, what do you want? It was the first real question anyone had asked me all night. I thought of contracts, of payroll due on the 30th, of vendors who deserved respect more than receptions deserved spectacle, of the brand Rachel had built that could be saved from the corners she'd cut, of the girl I had been who wanted nothing but a seat that didn't require shrinking. I want the laughing to stop costing people their dignity, I said. I want the numbers to be clean, and I want to sit where I'm not asked to disappear. A silence followed that didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. Rachel's grip tightened around the stem of a champagne flute she didn't remember picking up. The glass gave a small warning sound in her hand. Elara, Alexander said, a low tether, a reminder that I didn't have to explain further if I didn't want to. But the room wasn't finished with me. Not yet. Eyes gathered like storm clouds, allegiances reconfigured. The future of a company pivoted on whether a bride could share her stage with the truth. Rachel lifted the flute like a judge raises a gavel. And then the stem snapped. The champagne flute shattered with a sharp crack, liquid spraying across the linen in a pale golden arc. Gasps rippled through the room, bridesmaids stumbling back as shards scattered at Rachel's feet. For a moment, the ballroom itself seemed to recoil, the chandeliers trembling as though they'd witnessed something forbidden. Rachel stood there, chest heaving, fury radiating off her like heat from an open flame. Mark was the first to move. He lunged forward, gripping her wrist before she could grab another glass. "Rachel, stop," he hissed, his voice low but edged with panic. "You're making a scene." "Making a scene?" she snapped, twisting against his hold. "She's the one ruining everything. She walked in here with her savior and her lies, and you," her voice cracked, "you just sit there and let it happen?" I didn't flinch. My pulse was steady now, my shame replaced by something sharper, steadier. The fear that had once clung to me like a second skin had burned away under the weight of her unraveling. I stepped forward, the heels of my shoes clicking loud against the marble, claiming a space I'd never dared take before. "You made a scene the moment you ordered me to the back," I said, my tone calm, cold. "You've been making scenes my whole life, mocking, belittling, making sure everyone knew where you thought I belonged. Tonight isn't new, Rachel. It's just the first time you're the one standing in the spotlight." The words cut deeper than the shards at her feet. Her eyes flickered, darting across the faces now watching her with something other than admiration. Pity, maybe. Doubt. Guess who once laughed with her now leaned away, whispers curdling into silence. A bridesmaid's hand slipped from Rachel's arm as though touching her was dangerous now. "You think one revelation changes anything?" Rachel spat. "You think money makes you better than me?" "Money didn't change me," I said, voice unwavering. Silence did. Every cruel word you threw at me became fuel. Every door you slammed became one I pried open myself. While you were perfecting your smile, I was perfecting my independence. Her smirk wavered, brittle as thin ice. "You've always been pathetic, Elara. Hiding behind your books, your quiet little jobs. And now what? You want applause? Validation? From them?" She gestured to the crowd, her movements frantic. "They're laughing at you. They always will." But no one laughed. Not anymore. Even the cousins who'd once whispered behind napkins at holiday dinners sat rigid, eyes wide, realizing the balance had shifted. The room was no longer her kingdom. Alexander moved closer, his presence a silent wall at my back. His voice carried like steel through velvet. "Rachel, look around you. The only one being laughed at now is you." Rachel's face blanched, then flushed red. "Shut up," she whispered, but the words lacked force. Her fiancé still had her wrist, but his expression had changed. Where once he had smiled indulgently at her sharpness, now he looked embarrassed, ashamed. His jaw tightened as his eyes flicked toward me, then away again, like a man seeing cracks in the foundation of the house he was about to move into. "Mark," Rachel pleaded, her tone suddenly softer, desperate. "Don't let her do this. Don't let her turn everyone against me." But Mark's silence was louder than any defense. He didn't meet her eyes. "You spent years tearing me down," I said quietly, stepping closer until the air between us felt charged. "But here's the truth, Rachel. You only ever felt big because you thought I was small. The moment I stopped lowering my head, you had nothing left." Her lips trembled. For the first time, I saw something raw flicker in her eyes. Fear. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some nodding, others exchanging uneasy glances. The tide had turned, and Rachel knew it. Her power, once unquestioned, was crumbling right in front of her. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice breaking ragged. "You'll regret humiliating me." I tilted my head, my voice steady, final. "No. The only thing I regret is letting you humiliate me for so long." The words landed like a blow. Rachel staggered back a half step, steadying herself on the back of a chair. A thin fracture line spread across her composure, threatening to shatter completely. Alexander's hand hovered near mine, not quite touching, but close enough that I felt the unspoken reassurance. His voice was low, but it carried. "She won't be stepping on you anymore. Not now. Not ever." The room held its breath. Then Rachel snapped. "You can't come in here and ruin my night," she screamed, her voice shrill, almost breaking. "This is my rehearsal, my wedding, my life. You think you can take that away because you scribbled your name on some papers?" Her words cracked like glass under strain, desperation drowning the rage. She turned to Mark again, wild-eyed. "Tell her, Mark. Tell her none of this matters. Tell her she's nothing." Mark stood abruptly, releasing her wrist. His face was red, but not with loyalty. Red with anger, humiliation, something festering that he could no longer mask. "Rachel," he said, his tone sharp, cutting. "Enough. You're embarrassing yourself." The words landed harder than any of mine. Rachel flinched like he'd struck her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, curls trembling. "No, you don't mean that. You can't mean that." But Mark didn't answer. His silence was damning. The guests sat frozen, some covering their mouths, others staring as though they were watching a crown slip off a queen's head. The once glorious bride, the woman who had commanded every room, now stood shaking, shards of glass at her feet, her power unraveling thread by thread. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply stood taller, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. For once, I wasn't the shadow in the back. I was the one who refused to disappear. Rachel's eyes brimmed with tears, her voice breaking as she tried to cling to what little remained. "You can't do this to me. You can't take everything away." I held her gaze, steady, unflinching. "I didn't take anything from you, Rachel. You destroyed yourself." The silence that followed was crushing. Every guest felt it. Every whisper had died. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum with the weight of truth. Rachel's chest rose and fell rapidly, her perfect image collapsing before everyone's eyes. Her bridesmaids stayed distant now, their painted smiles gone. Her groomsmen stared at their shoes, unwilling to meet her gaze. She was alone in the center of the ballroom she thought she owned. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who wanted to disappear. Rachel's chest rose and fell like she was drowning on dry land. Her eyes darted to every corner of the room, searching for an ally, a lifeline, but all she found were downcast eyes and silence that pressed against her skin like judgment. Mark stepped away from her, his face unreadable, jaw clenched tight. He looked at her the way a man looks at a painting he once loved, only to realize the frame was cracked, the colors bleeding. His voice cut the hush like a blade. "Rachel, if this is who you are, humiliating your own sister in front of family, lashing out at everyone who doesn't applaud, Maybe I need to reconsider walking down that aisle. The room erupted in gasps. Chairs shifted. Whispers ignited like sparks in dry grass. Rachel froze, her mouth falling open as though the ground beneath her had vanished. You don't mean that, she stammered, her voice trembling. Mark, you can't. But his silence was confirmation. He didn't take her hand. He didn't even look at her. I felt no triumph, no gloating, only the strange lightness of years loosening their grip. I had carried shame like a stone in my chest for so long, and now it cracked open, hollowing me out until all that was left was air. Rachel's eyes flooded, tears cutting streaks down her makeup. You'll regret this, she whispered, but the words held no teeth anymore, no venom. They were brittle, desperate, broken. I stepped closer, my voice low, steady. For her alone, though, the entire ballroom heard it. No. The only thing I regret is giving you the power to humiliate me for so long. That ends tonight. Her lips trembled. She tried to form a retort, but nothing came. Her hands shook as she reached for another glass, only to think better of it when Mark flinched. Her perfect image, gone. The golden bride reduced to someone human, fragile, exposed. I turned to the guests, my gaze sweeping across every face. I didn't come here to steal a spotlight, I said, my words deliberate, carrying. I came because I was invited, because I wanted to support family, even when family never supported me. But cruelty isn't entertainment, mockery isn't tradition, and silence. My eyes flicked briefly to Alexander, steadying myself on the fire in his gaze. Silence is not acceptance. A ripple of shame passed through the crowd. Some lowered their eyes, some nodded faintly. No one laughed anymore. Rachel's sobs broke the stillness. She pressed trembling fingers against her cheeks, smearing her mascara, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her bridesmaids edged away, their faces pale. The groomsmen shifted uncomfortably, uncertain if standing near her would stain them too. Mark exhaled sharply, his voice taut. Rachel, enough. You've done enough damage tonight. His tone was final, and in it, I heard the quiet collapse of her perfect wedding dream. I didn't stay to watch her break further. I had no desire to stand in the ruins of her pride. I had my own life waiting, a life no longer measured against hers. Alexander's hand brushed mine lightly, not a claim, but an anchor. He leaned close, his voice, just for me. You don't need to prove anything else, not tonight. I nodded, my throat tight but steady. My heels clicked against the marble as I moved toward the ballroom doors. And something astonishing happened. The crowd parted for me, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. For once, they weren't whispering mockery. They were whispering my name. Elara, some murmured softly, like they were learning it for the first time. Rachel's sobs echoed behind me, muffled by the walls she'd built that had finally cracked. As the heavy double doors swung open, the cool night air rushed over me, sharp and liberating. The glitter of the ballroom was replaced by the dark velvet of the sky, scattered with stars. I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight slide from my shoulders. Beside me, Alexander's presence was steady, quiet. He didn't look at me like I was a spectacle. He didn't look at me like I was a mistake. He looked at me like I was seen. Why? I asked softly, the question pulled from somewhere deep, raw. Why did you step in back there? His eyes softened, the steel in them easing. Because I saw someone worth defending, he said. Someone who didn't realize she already had the power to defend herself. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not the polite, forced smile I'd used to survive, but a real one. It felt fragile and strong all at once, like glass forged into something unbreakable. Thank you, I whispered. He shook his head. Don't thank me. You did that on your own. All I did was remind you who you are. I glanced back once, through the glass doors. Rachel stood in the ruins of her night, mascara streaking, Mark's back turned toward her. The ballroom no longer belonged to her, and for the first time, I knew with bone-deep certainty I wasn't the shadow anymore. I was the storm they never saw coming.